This week, Mark, we've got some questions that are all about helping horses that have a specific problem or a difficulty. So these are going to cover a whole range of things from crib biting, standing still, to picking up the back feet, an intensive fear of needles, to running away. So interested to hear your thoughts and solutions for all of these. Hello, welcome to Mark Langley's Horsemanship Podcast, a podcast helping people to understand their horses better, to provide solutions in a calm, connected way. I'm Jenny Langley.
And I'm Mark Langley.
Let's start with crib biting. It's not one that we come across that often, but Mark, this is a question from Lottie, and she would like to know, can it be cured? What can you do about it?
I'm a believer that everything, especially displacement behaviour like that, we have a responsibility to try and heal it. Whether you can completely cure it, depending on the context, the person, what they do, the horse, everything, is you may be able to, you may not be able to. Okay, so I'm not going to say yes or no to the can you cure it completely, but displacement behaviour is a mindset in a horse. Sort of, there's food aggression, there's, crib biting, wind sucking, there's weaving and pacing fences and horses that just constantly nibble their owners all the time. And some horse, there's so many different things that is a form of coping mechanism from the stress that they're in. So, some people say, well, I've got a windsucker or a crib biter or something, and I put it out in a big paddock with a big mob, and it still goes and finds a post and sucks on the post. And it's like, I thought being in a big herd and not being in a stable anymore or a small environment, it would get all the stimulant from the other horses and then become comfortable and happy and have other things to do. And then it stops that. Then I've had horses that have sort of slowly weaned off that habit by being out in big mobs and, different things like that. So basically, but a displacement behaviour starts and then it becomes a neuro pathway, which that's when it becomes an addiction. So that's the problem, is every time the horse gets a little stressed or there's a flicker of anxiety or I don't know what to do, it's straight to the rail, and then it just does it just because it's bored. So then, I'm crib biting when I'm nervous, and then I'm just crib biting because I'm bored, because I'm actually a bit anxious when I'm bored because I'm bored. So if you look at it, like, you got to take the boredom out of a horse, which means put it in a mob. Then all of a sudden, because it's not a very good coping horse, it ends up at the bottom of the pecking order, because the other horses go, you're not welcome in our herd because you've got all these issues, and we can't have you in our herd because you're going to jeopardise this nice structure that we already have. So then you pull horses in a herd sucking on a rail somewhere because it's the bottom of the pecking order, and the herd has created an anxiety in that horse that just puts it back on to the crib biting, okay, or something like that. So it's not an easy fix. So training fixes everything, I believe. A lot of it not good training doesn't fix it, but it actually. A human can do what a horse can't do. We can actually give a horse an alternative. We can say, that stress and that coping mechanism is not available. Why don't you try something different? Why don't you try something different? Why don't you try something different? And that's how we sort of stop it. So, but where does it start, and how does your horse search? Like, it's a very sort of big subject, because when a horse has a displacement behaviour, I think of it, I add a little stress and I watch it and I go, you don't know how to search, do you? You don't know how to solve problems. You've been grown up in an environment where you never had the opportunity to solve problems, or so you've just always got in trouble, or you've always, been, so you're lost. So basically, the way you lead the horse, the way you direct your horse, everything gets that horse to search, make a good decision, or just get anxious and not know what to do. So with crib biting, if you have your horse in an electric fence, it's nothing to grab onto to crib bite. That's stopping it from being able to do it. It might find another displacement behaviour, you're not sure. So that's the problem. You take one away, it'll find another one if it's one of those horses that really can't process things. Putting it in a herd, if that herd structure accepts it and it's happy in a herd, taking away things that it can go and suck on or chew on or whatever, then basically you're eliminating that. You're giving it stimulant in a herd. The horse has got 24/7 food. It doesn't have to go hungry, waiting for its next feed, all that sort of stuff. It's got good grass in the paddock or good hay as the alternative to that. A horse that's crib bites or anything like that, I would somehow work its feed routine, or all the other horses is with it, a feed routine where it's not waiting for a high value food, causing stress, going, oh, food's not on time, I'm stressing, what can I chew on, what displacement behavior can I have? I'd probably try and find a medium value food and not give it high value food once a day, and then have, ordinary, crappy hay for the rest of the time or something like that. I'd try and, have an even amount of food that is not waiting for anything. So if that's in the equation, I wouldn't have it stabled alone or paddocked alone too often where it's kind of stressed and it's seeking, you're trying to sort of taking away all those reasons why it started to do that, all those stress reasons and that caused it. And then, as I say, back to the educational side of things, what you're going to do is you're going to be, every one of those horses, when they get anxious, I'm trying to direct their thoughts. And it's really hard to explain on a podcast. There's so many things that I might do, but I watch a horse and I watch closely if it tries to solve problems or it tries to just think about safety. And you watch a lot of horses as you create a little negative stimulant, like wave a flag, and they go, oh, where's the other horses, or where's the gate, or, I can't think about this. I don't want to. I'm going to kind of go into my little place. And very quickly you can see if a foal is going to turn into a horse that has strong displacement behavior versus another foal who says, no, I go out and I solve problems. I'm not going to become an addict. You see it as babies now, and I see it now, and I kind of now was saying to some people at the last clinic, as I said, when you see it when they're babies and you see that they have a strong, I don't want to solve the problem, where's my friends, or where's the gate over there, my last place of safety, when things get a little bit heated in their mind, very quickly that horse is going to turn into a horse that puts the problem to the side and just goes and finds a coping mechanism, which becomes anything like that. So, I guess you've got to watch how your horse is searching. Can you direct its thoughts, things like that? That's all the things I want to be looking at in the guidance of that horse. If the horse has a hard thought and it fixates for a moment, can you interrupt it and until you can just do something small and the horse gets an interruption and goes, oh, sorry, I'm back in the land of the living. So you watch how mobile their thoughts are. If they look at a cow in the distance, do they fixate on it? Does it or do they sort of look at it, process it, and then you can interrupt that and get them to think about something else? So those horses, you've got to be constantly interrupting, what you see is a bit of a hard thought or something, and seeing if they can replace it with something else. So they stare out to the right, you might interrupt that and say, why don't we go over here instead, think to the left, do something else, all that sort of stuff. That's really important.
Not an easy position to have with crib biting, and good luck with helping your horse with that one. But this one's a little bit more practical. It's a question that's comes from Lisa, and it's about her mare that keeps going down in a float. She's got an unfancy straight loading float, and up until recently, her mare has travelled fine in it. She's never been a huge fan of the horse float, but she self-loads and backs off sensibly. She never used to be a scrambler. She went down for the first time a few weeks ago on a 2-hour trip. She took her to a riding lesson last week, which was less than 10 kilometres away from home, and she went down as she went round a corner. Wasn't driving too quickly. Today, she took her to the riding lesson again, and she went down twice on the way there, which is a relatively flat and easy travel. So on the way home, she put her on the other side, and she seemed more settled. She's wondering, is it to becoming a habit? Do you have any tips? Because obviously it's a bit of a stressful situation, taking a horse that could go down at any moment.
Yeah, it's probably one of the most debilitating, I think, or traumatizing things for people when they have a horse in the back of their float that they don't know when it's going to scramble and go down or panic and sort of flip over or things like that. And I know it's terrifying, for people. I've had a lot of people turn up clinics, more stressed than their horses, worrying about this sort of very thing. So scrambling can be fixed. How long it takes to fix is depending on the horse, but once bitten, twice shy. Once they sort of start to scramble a bit more and they get more frozen, they get more worried, and then they just don't know how to balance. So I had a scrambler, and I think that video is actually on the membership. It's an older video on the membership that I did years ago at a clinic of a horse, and I could hear it scrambling. I'd already started the clinic because she was running late, and I could hear this horse turning up, and I could hear his float banging and crashing and stuff. And I'm like, gee, we're going to have to spend the whole clinic working on scrambling for this particular horse. What it is, horses, as you probably know, and you probably heard me talk about it, is go into freeze. They go into some sort of freeze where they just become, almost like you're hiding in a cupboard while someone's, burgling your house that's got a gun. You're hiding because you don't want to get shot or something. So some people go into a kind of freeze mode where they can't really do anything about it because they're adrenaline and stuff. And horses go into that freeze a lot. It's a very common thing. And then they just aren't able to just loosely balance and find their mobility in a float. And then all of a sudden what happens with freeze is when you come out, you panic and you scramble, or you fall over and then you scramble, because then you get a jolt to the system and then you start moving, but there's no kind of accuracy or proprioception, things like that. So there's so many ways to, if I look at a horse, I could see at a distance that horse, it may not be a scrambler, but I can say to the owner, that horse, I believe, has the potential to be a scrambler because of the way it operates when there's a little bit of pressure on it. Okay. So one of the good things that I do with horses that help with mobility and proprioception especially, and this works on understanding boundaries, is I put them in the long range in a halter, just a soft halter, and I just move around them in the long range. And I might do that for a week if you have to, where you can back your horse up, you can move around it, and the horse is just moving its hind feet and front feet off the feel of the pressure of the reins down its sides and things like that. And you just get it really soft and mobile in between the long reins, and just keep doing it over and over and over till the horse can just move softly, and all 4 feet are mobile, because that gets them used to those boundaries and being able to move in between boundaries. When you lead your horse on a float, don't just let it go in. If it was taught to be self-loaded and it just wants to go in to get the job over, don't let it go in. Teach the horse to move very, very softly into the float, 1 foot at a time. Don't rush in, take soft steps. And so you might have to spend a week getting your horse to lead really, really nice in your hands and be able to move the hind over softly with a twist of your rope and just get it nice and mobile, lift the wither to walk like a cat sort of thing, and really soft. And then when you got that horse soft, the only way you teach it to lead into that float is soft. So basically you do some leading on the ramp till it's really soft, and then you let it stand and just process what it's just done. Maybe sniff the float if it has to. If sniffing turns into a displacement behaviour and it starts to sniff the ground and just get addicted to the smell and not really process the float, then pick it up and say, well, no, I don't want you getting distracted in the smell of the wee that could have been the wee smell or something that's in the float, or hay smell. Or you pick it up and say, now process with movement, and you just get that horse loosely moving up and down the ramp very, very softly, and then until you can sort of rock them backwards and forwards all the way into the chest bar, and there's not any part of that float that they feel tied in and kind of a little bit stressed in. And when you lead, you get all 4 feet leading softly, no stretching out and sniffing, no, just all 4 feet floats with the horse as they go in, and plenty of time just to sort of stop, process, things like that. The other thing I do once I've done that, as I start to shake the float and I move the float, I'll be wobbling the float the best I can, get someone else to shake the float and have a shake in that float, so it starts to cause a bit of kind of noise and vibration in the floor and things like that. And then I teach the horse to loosely walk in and out of that float with you while the float is vibrating, noisy, making, there's certain conflict. And then the horse learns how to walk on like what I call the vibrating platform, and they can walk in and out loosely while the float's moving, and wobbling and making noises. And what I say to people is, you can turn the volume up. If the volume's up, you can always turn it down. The problem with a lot of floating is people load their horses with the float nice and quiet, hay in the front, open the front door, make it look like a lovely kind of lounge room, with Netflix and everything, and then they put the ramp up, and then they close the front door, they turn the Netflix off, and then all of a sudden the float's vibrating and the horse gets deceived. So if I can make the float noisier in the loading process, more conflict in the float, more vibration, and get the horse soft at walking in and out, then when you drive off, technically, hopefully, it might feel like the volume's been turned down, so the float got quieter as you drove off, opposed to being very quiet and then driving off, and then your horse freezes and starts to scramble. So if you can sort of work on that, and then once you got your horse, and the other thing is work on a breeching rope outside the float, like the long reins. It's another way of getting a horse to follow a feel. And then when your horse is in the float, then you put the float dividers all up, and then you just move your horse softly inside the float, back to the back breeching gate, forward, wobble them until all 4 feet are loose inside the boundary of the float as it would travel. Once they can move all 4 feet loosely in there while you're leading and backwards and forwards, get someone to shake the float, make some noise.
Whilst the float was moving. It's interesting that I would never have put scrambling was totally related to anxiety, but now you've sort of described what's actually happening, it totally makes sense. So there you go. Okay, so from a horse that scrambles to a horse that needs to stand still. This is in relation to carriage driving, and it's a question that comes from Andrea from Australia. She says that when this particular horse that she's working with is a carriage driving horse, and she needs to teach it to stop and stand. It's really important. So she's been doing a lot of sort of long lining ground driving. And when she asks for a stop and a stand, her horse is fidgeting. So what she'd like to know is it best to walk the horse forward and try again and circle around to the same spot and try again? What would you do? She's got to try and increase the length of time when they're standing. So she's got to get the horse moving again before it starts to fidget, but she has to increase that period of time when she's asking for just stand.
Well, a horse shouldn't have a problem standing still. If you look at a horse under a tree and it can stand for half an hour, then your horse should be able to stand in long reins for half an hour, in the carriage for half an hour. So it's the horse's thoughts are somewhere else. It's not centered, and there's anxiety. So there's something in what you're doing, or not necessarily what you're doing, not deliberately, but there's something in what you're doing when you're guiding your horse in the horse's mind that's saying, I'm not comfortable in this. I need to be somewhere else, and that's why it's fidgeting. So otherwise, a horse would just stand still. If it didn't want to be somewhere else, it just stands still. So it's not letting go of a forward thought. So go back to your long riding and do some mobility lessons in the long lines, get the horse just to move between the reins, back up till it's got a backward thought. Remember, back up till it's got a backward thought, not back up while it's thinking forward and then hope it stands still and all it does is go forward. So everything you do is changing a horse's thought. If when the horse is at a standstill it changes again, so be it. You have to do something to change that thought again. But you've got to back up till it's comfortable thinking backwards softly, and then when you loosen or you slow down, the horse softens and stands there, okay? So maybe you might sort of be a bit more mobile in the long reins, getting the horse to move around inside the long reins, back up, no forwards, just moving around softly, backing. And when the horse is kind of mesmerized and soft and not thinking anywhere else in the long reins, you just might stop and just let it stand in that place of stillness, because they're following the path of least resistance, okay? And do more of that in the long range so your horse is just really, really loose and connected to the feel of the long range. The other thing is in all your work, doesn't matter where it is, monitor where your horse's thoughts are. And if the horse is constantly a little anxious thinking somewhere else, you have to interrupt that. So you have to work on your horse being very centered all the time. And when you're leading your horse, it shouldn't be following body language. It shouldn't be a cart horse should definitely not be following body language. Okay. So just in general, when you're leading your horse, is it following the feel of that rope? When that rope stops, does it stop? When the rope moves a little bit, does it follow that rope and with the exact feel of that rope? Okay. So, watch how present and centered your horse is when you're around it. Interrupt the long thoughts if you have to. So the horse gets in more of a mindset of being present and calm and centered. And then basically find out all the areas that you're providing anxiety that would cause the horse to want to think away a lot. So, the horse might be frightened of you behind it, and in the long range, it's always anxious. So you might have to work on back behind it and work if there's areas there that you can help that's anxiety-based thing caused by you, and work on that. So, but once a horse can lead, right, and it trusts us, it can stand for as long as that rope stays quiet. So, in everything you do, look for that, and you shouldn't have a problem in the long range. And then in the carriage.
Okay, so this is another standing still question, but this time to do with the back feet. It comes from Patricia in the UK. She's trying to pick up its back feet and it keeps moving. Any tips for her?
Yeah, so the back feet and if she also, one thing is there's a big resource online. We've got all these, young foal handling videos and stuff like that you'll see the techniques that I start horses to pick their feet up, and also, any of the videos where horses are scared at the back of their eyes or still nervous and stuff like that, and the leading videos all lead to a horse picking up their feet really well. And there's one particular video of Coco, which I can think of, that's a really good one. But anyway, so basically you have to, if you do a nice leading lesson with your horse, you have to address if the horse is scared of you behind its eyes, I should say. So when you lead the horse by and you rub your horse down its side with your hand as it's walking past you, you're standing still, you're leading it past you, because you want the horse to be able to move softly past you, not stand still and then you go to its feet and then suddenly it gets worried and wants to move away. If they can move softly past you and you can rub your hand all the way over their hip and down their leg a little bit and they're okay and they're not swinging that hip out in a hurry, then you kind of know that they're kind of okay with that. If they're swinging their hip out in a hurry when you're kind of leading them past, then you might sort of have a little stick with just a rag or something like a bit of an extension to your hand, and just rub them a little bit, back them up, bring them forward again, and let them, have that thing touch them all the way over the hip until they can walk a straight line, or you can walk beside them walking a straight line, and they can have that whilst they're walking, rubbing all the way down their leg softly, and they're not flinching and fighting, and they're not worried about that feel of that thing on their leg. And you do that on both sides until you can walk them, stop them, back them, walk them forward, stop them, and rub them with that thing all the way down. So there's no spots in the handling process that they're nervous and flinchy and want to move away and stuff like that. And then you kind of do it with your hands. I have my horse kind of walking a little circle. I rub them a little bit, then I let them stop. What I mean is I pull the rope behind my back and I just let them walk around while I rub them. And then I just go down their feet, pick up a foot, and not pick it up, but just take the weight off a foot, let it off, go around the other side, and do that all the way around, all 4 feet. In the leading, also, like a few answers to a few of the questions, does your horse follow a feel, stop? What I mean is when the feel of the rope goes quiet, they stop quietly with the rope. Can they ground tie? As in, when you pick up the rope, they move a little bit, you place the rope, they stand with it. As long as that rope stands still, they stand quietly. Is their mind in a soft place? Are they centered? Are they, so the better the horse leads, the more of a better mindset it's in, so the more it can stand longer for having its feet handled and stuff like that. So, you might have to work on good quality leading so you can see the horse stay engaged with leading for half an hour and not sort of just go off with the pixies every so often. And then when you've got an engaged mind, then the picking up the feet is half the battle. And then really all you're looking at is, can it follow the feel of your hand on its feet? And is there any sensitive spots that it's still scared of?
And you just keep handing them. But you can see all that in the videos. So that will give you a lot of direction, Patricia, on areas to work on. But the next question is about a horse that's really petrified of needles. It comes from Romy in Australia, and they would like to know how you would go about helping this particular horse. A lot of background trauma issues. It's a 14-year-old large gelding that was a draft cross rescue, always described as just fine and would stand for the vet and procedures. But of course, that wasn't the case. He was rescued and adopted and turned out to be robotic and shut down. But now they're finding, of course, that they need to do certain husbandry and care around this particular horse. He's not aggressive in any way. And the vet has been able to build up quite a strong relationship with them and improve that trust. But as soon as he sees a needle, he will flee the situation at any cost. So she'd like to know, how could she go about maybe improving his ability to accept a needle in the event that he may need to get one at some point?
Okay, the first thing you have to do, and it's got nothing to do with needles, is get him to have adjustable thoughts. He sounds like he's hiding in a shell in a state of freeze, too terrified to fight and attack people and, try and save his own life, and just kind of really, really frozen and shut down. And then suddenly it overloads, and then he goes to sort of resorts to leaving. I had a little horse at a clinic that I've helped. He's a little Icelandic horse, and same thing. An owner breeder had chased him around with a flag in a round pen to sort of, and then if you put him in the long reins or anything like that, and he started, but you can tell he'll just hunker down and be quite frozen. And then if you were behind him and waved a flag, you just take off, boom, just instantly. Just flee, run. I've had a lot of cold-blooded horses that, have tried to jump through float windows and stuff suddenly when they woke up. So basically, if I was working him myself, first thing I'd do was create a little bit of anxiety. I'd probably do it near his eyes. There's some videos of me with horses that are a bit frozen where I've got the flag and I'm just sort of tap, 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 not tapping on their eye, but just moving it near their eye until they kind of they blink and they go, I don't know what to do, and they look away a little bit. Because those horses, they just freeze and hunker down or focus on the pressure, and then as soon as they do look away, they just when they're under a lot of pressure, that's when they just leave. Okay, so it's important that you can get the horse, and I know it's people might sound I'm crazy, but I've seen so many horses, this has helped so much. And that's instead of being frozen, like you can see my expression. Well, people who listen to the podcast won't see my expression, but when you're kind of frozen, got that frozen look on your face and you're just staring at one thing. Well, really all you want the horse to do is kind of look around a little bit, look away and search a little bit, look away and search a bit. So they'll see something a bit that they're a bit frightened of, and then they'll go, I might look away. I just looked away and nothing happened. I might look away again. Then what starts to happen, you start to open up a neuro pathway where the horse sort of blinks and can't stay in a state of freeze, and they start to search and look a bit, and then all of a sudden you'll see them look a bit more, and then you'll start them seeing look and breathe. And they'll look and breathe and they'll do something for themselves. They'll eventually start to sort of think about moving. But instead of sort of suddenly going, I'm going to run away, they move towards their thoughts, and they might just think away and move away a little bit and things like that. Another thing, I'd work on as well, and sometimes this doesn't necessarily mean you have to move their thoughts across to the left and right, but it's just put something that they're concerned about near them and get them to move away from it themselves. So they're actually doing things about the things that they're scared of. You don't have to make them. We've got to make them enough that they try and do something, but they have to do something. You're trying to take them out of freeze. So you're looking at unfreezing your horse's body, unfreezing its mind, so they feel that they can do things. So they're in time with anxiety, not late by freezing and then bolting. So after doing all this and having your horse in time with anxiety, how do you help it with needles? Well, you might have to go into a smaller yard where the horse can't get away, maybe have it on a longer rope, and you come in with a needle, and I would actually sort of walk around with a needle, and when that horse sees the needle, or the syringe, I would have the rope loose enough that the horse can think away from it and have the yard there so it doesn't bolt and run out of your hand, and just get it to sort of kind of look away, move away from that needle, and then just sort of then let the yard catch it and then lead it back a little bit, and then and teach it that, here's a needle, you can move away and you can come back through feel, and you can move away and come back through feel. And as you're getting that horse to come back through feel, you're getting it closer and closer to the hand that has the needle. And then eventually you might just get that horse to kind of lead in and just maybe see if you can get it to follow the needle, even just like you're just following that syringe and hand, and just come in and just sniff on it, and you're leading it eventually using. It's kind of like approach and retreat, but instead of you approaching and retreating with the needle and the horse staying still, not being able to do anything, you allow the horse to retreat a bit and then come back through feel and then retreat a bit and you'll be moving more in a backward way because the needle's moving away from it all the time, until the horse can maybe sniff it, come up and then you can just gently touch with the syringe and needle, and then go, and then you move away, and then because it already knows how to move away, it's done it, it's ticked it off its bucket list, and then you touch and go until you can start to touch the horses in different places and then retreat with the needle. So it can come in, touch the needle and go away from it. You can come in, touch the horse and go away from it. So you've done both scenarios until at least the horse is good with the needle and not terrified of it, because it was trapped somehow trapped in its mind when it first got needled and handled. It thought it was getting eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. So still has to understand that there's a pinchy feeling or a pain involved in needling, but you've got to get it over the syringe needle trauma first for a while, and then just see where it's at. It might take you some time. Unfortunately, if you have to give it needles every day, then it's tough. But if you can do that, you'll start to get on top of its phobia. And the
final question for today is from Bridget from Australia. She's got a new horse who is 7 years old, who was previous team penned and had a lot of rough handling. They've managed to get him a bit softer and a little bit more trusting. But since the very first day of having him, he has this habit where as soon as they take his halter off to release him into the paddock, he seems to want to flee and escape. So it's almost like as they go through the gate, her hand touches the halter and he tries to bolt. They've tried standing with him and releasing tension, and they've tried double haltering him. Sometimes she can unclip the lead rope and leave the halter on, but as soon as he realizes what's happening, he just escapes. They've also tried releasing him in a small area, but as soon as she lets him into the bigger area, that's when he bolts. Now, interestingly, he's actually fine in the arena. When they take the halter off and put the bridle on, they think he's really relaxed. So it's just at the end of the day when he's going into his paddock. Have you got any tips for them, please?
Yeah, so half the things, like I've talked about before, is it becomes habits and neuro pathways. So there is a certain habit of that halter, the halter coming off, creating a freedom. And I call the halter in some horses a mental hobble, like an emotional hobble. So then all of a sudden you put the halter on, they close up a little bit. So, you've worked on a bit of connection, and sometimes a better connection and thoughts towards the person and feeling good around a person makes the horse not want to run away from the person. So some people do a bit of liberty and stuff to get that to work. But what I try and encourage people to understand is, why does the halter cause this feeling in the horse? It's the halter that's causing the problem. So you could have a good connection at liberty where your horse wants to be with you and stuff like that. But then for some reason, when you take that halter off, it feels like it was trapped in the halter, so it wants to get away. So if you can go out on your horse in the paddock and it wants to follow you around, it likes you, it doesn't want to always be with other horses, and it's worried about you, then it has to be worked through with the halter. If you can't do that, then you've obviously go out there and actually have to sort of work on having a better relationship and connection with your horse. So with the halter off, the horse doesn't want to just scoot off all the time. But don't work on hyper focus on just following you around, because that can cause an emotional hobble. I just want to see if you can hang with your horse, do stuff with it, and it doesn't just need to be with the other horses at liberty. Okay, so go and address that, find out how much of that is also in the equation. But I'm going to talk about more the halter and how a halter hobbles a horse's brain. So basically, a lot of horses, when they're taught, go away from pressure and come back with a halter, go away with pressure, come back with a halter, they get a spook, pull them, say, don't run away. That, we're always pulling on a rope or pulling on a rein to say, don't do that. Don't think over there. Oh, you're trying to run away from me. Come back. And I'd say that's the problem. When I use a halter and I teach people how to lead horses, I'm saying, think over there. Go towards your thoughts. So there's opportunity through feel. The horse is open. It can make decisions. There's a bit of room in that feel. And when I lead horses, I constantly teaching them to go towards their thoughts. So instead of sending them away from a stick and then pulling them back with a rope, I'm saying, go over there with the feel of the rope. So they go, and I watch them, and I get them, and I watch them look away, sniff the air, breathe the ground, go, travel. And then because that halter frees them up to search, frees them up to do something different. And then when they've done that, then I'll say, now come back with the halter and come over to me, or and constantly working them in the halter so they're free and their mind is mobile and not frozen and trapped. And when you get that halter and lead rope working really well, that the mind's not frozen, not trapped, nice and free, then in the arena you might go away, come back, take the halter off, go back up, put the halter on. And every time I put the halter on the horse, I say, now search away, and I let the horse travel away for a little while in the halter in a straight line. And then I say, now come back, and then go away, and then come back. And then I take the halter off and walk away, and then come back again and put it back on. And then after a while, the horse goes, oh, it's not a trap. It doesn't always trap me. So it doesn't have this suddenly burst of freedom when it comes off. And if you can understand that in your leading, you'll fix the problem. But you still have to work on a bit more connection, happy a horse around you at liberty and stuff like that. But that double haltering technique is just a double trap. So, you're just saying, oh, I got you, and it's a trick. And eventually they'll understand the trick. So empower your horse through feel, not depower it by using it as the hobble that keeps them contained with you. And then you'll have a horse that whether the halter's on or off, it still feels the same.
Thank you so much for the questions that have come through. I hope you found this Q&A interesting. We'll be back again next week for more horse training related questions and solutions. If you'd like to ask Mark your question and get his insights to help you and your horse, it's easy to join Mark Langley online. Head over to marklangley.com.au and hit join. It's less than a couple of coffees, and the Q&A is just a piece of a whole package designed to support you and your horse with great training.